Okay. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. And it's so exciting to welcome you to another webinar again this afternoon. Some of you are on holiday, so thank you for joining. Some of you are working, so thank you for making time. And it's a topic which I think really a lot of geographers enjoy, you know, like the real geography stuff. So welcome, and also to our presenter, Werner Stradom. He's going to actually tell you a little bit more about himself, but I'll leave that to him just now. So just a very quick reminder, please, that we'd like you to preferably keep your video and sound off just to allow better streaming. You're very welcome to ask questions in the chat. I hope you can all see the chat, or at the end. Van is quite happy to answer questions at the end as well. So I hope you've got something to eat or drink, something with you that you can just relax and enjoy the presentation. So, you know, geography teachers, and I think South Africans in general, quite enjoy making jokes about things around us, right? And there have been jokes around about earthquakes and stuff, and I had to laugh. The middle one to me was just the best. Like, a geography teacher will probably go and put it on Facebook and then go, okay, where's the rest of the family? Fine. But anyway, so we kind of joke about these things, and you know what, maybe there's actually some truth in the matter about a fault line running through Cape Town, and maybe there is something that we need to just check out there. So Van, I'm going to leave that up to you, and we are going to now just have a wonderful time listening to you, trying to prove or disprove your theory. So thank you so much.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so sorry, I'm just getting back into the computer again. It's just thrown me out a bit. I'm using a different one. But while I'm at it, my name is Werner Stradom. I used to be a geologist for Goldfields South Deep from 2007 to 2013. I've done some work on the Witwatersrand gold deposits, and I've also been doing some platinum and chromium exploration back in 2006. And since 2013, I've been working as an online teacher on and off. So yes, the reason why is, unfortunately, the mining industry took a bit of a dip. And so I found myself doing online teaching, which I thoroughly enjoy. And my passion for geology has never waned. At that time, I just decided to keep my skills sharpened. And I mapped the west coast of Melkbos Strand all the way down to Blouberg Strand. And that is when I started picking up some things in the rocks, which I'm going to show you now. And I hope that you enjoy this presentation. So please ask me any questions. I'm going to share my screen now. And then I'm just going to cancel this, and I'm just going to quickly pop up and open up a new window here on Google Docs and just quickly get that presentation out. Computer which I'm working from, and unfortunately our weather is just not playing with us today. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Just shout if you're going to struggle to get hold of it, because then I've got it open here for you too as well. Okay.
All right. It's almost a thank you, Ineke. I've almost got it here. Let's just see. It's just taking a while to load up, so please forgive me for that. This is a 2007 version computer. Okay, let's have a look here. So yes, I decided to keep my geological skills a bit sharp, and mapping these rocks here at Melkbos was really a lot of fun, I must say. Also rather challenging in some cases. So here's a little bit of background about me, which I've already stated. If you've got any questions about that, please feel free to ask anytime. That's what I'm here for. And yeah, so I'm going to start sharing the presentation from here. So shake, rattle, and roll. Shake, rattle, and rock. Cape Town faults, fact or fiction? All right, so Cape Town is located, or the area of Cape Town is located within the SALDANIA orogenic belt. Now, when I talk about orogenic belts, I mean that those are basically the remains of ancient mountain ranges. All right, so it's basically the remains of an ancient mountain range, which has now since been eroded down to ground level. Yes, you've got some hills here and there, but it is throughout Cape Town, and it's mostly covered by younger sediments, but you get some good outcrops along Melkbos Strand all the way to False Bay of these SALDANIA orogenic belt rocks. And also Blouberg Kop itself outside of Melkbos Strand is also a good place, in the Durbanville Hills, also good areas where you can find these SALDANIA rocks. All right, so it's called the SALDANIA orogenic belt, and it is a Neoproterozoic to early Cambrian age. So it's about 560 to 510 million years old. All right, so it's quite old. It's a very, very ancient mountain root system, and it was formed by the closure of the Adamastor Ocean. So the Adamastor Ocean is basically your proto-Atlantic Ocean. It was the first, well, it was an earlier version of today's Atlantic Ocean, put it that way, which existed between South America and Africa. All right. So it was formed by the closure of that ocean as parts of South America started to move towards Africa. All right. The SALDANIA belt in Cape Town, as you can see over here, this is more or less, yes, Cape Town over there. And this is basically where you find the outcrops of the SALDANIA belt in these multicolored areas. All right, so there are two primary rock formations within the SALDANIA belt. Okay, you've got the Tygerberg Formation. The Tygerberg Formation is essentially gray wacky. That's a very, very dirty sandstone. It's not a clean sandstone. It's really, really dirty. It's almost very gray in color. All right, so it's not a clean sandstone. It's got a lot of clay fragments in it, a lot of other impurities in it. You've got shale, which used to be mud rock. You've got siltstone. You've got some volcanic ash or tuff. And you also got some rhyolitic volcanic rocks in the area, all right? And they're especially prevalent, these volcanic tuffs and rhyolite rocks are especially prevalent at Blouberg Strand itself. All right, so it's not so much at Melkbos Strand, but it's very prevalent in Blouberg Strand. So this is basically your Tygerberg Formation rock. So it's essentially a dirty sandstone, some shales and siltstones, and with lesser volcanic tuff and some volcanic rocks, rhyolite rocks, which were expelled very violently within local volcanoes in that area, but which don't exist anymore. Then you have the Swartland Formation. So your Tygerberg Formation is more or less in this area right over here. It's around Cape Town to False Bay to SALDANIA is your Tygerberg Formation. And then to the north of it towards Malmesbury is your Swartland rocks. Your Swartland rocks are outcropping in that area all the way through to the Paddle area. All right. So your Swartland Formation is essentially schist, which is shale that's been put under very high pressure. All right. Mica schist, quartz schist, which is basically sandstone, which has been rubbed and very, very highly deformed. All right. And recrystallized to form a quartz schist. A mica schist is a very, very highly deformed and sheared mud rock. And then you get some limestones, and you also will find some oceanic basalts and gabbro. Now, they are especially prevalent in an area in the Western Cape called Bridgetown. All right. So in Bridgetown, you will find some basalt and gabbro, which were formed at an ocean floor, at the floor of the Adamastor Ocean. And they've since been crunched up when South America collided with Africa. And then going through every single one of these rock units will be the Cape granite soot. Now, you know that the Cape Town area is very famous for its granites. You will see it at Table Mountain itself. If you go to the cable car, you will see that road running along Table Mountain follows the contact with the granite and the younger sediments above it. All right, so the granites are pretty much everywhere. They go through every single one of these units, of these sedimentary and metasedimentary units. All right. Now, just to give you a little bit of a background, this is pretty much what Cape Town used to look like about 560 million years ago. All right. So this is essentially as close as approximation we can get to what the Cape Town area used to look like. So you had these volcanoes coming out and depositing the rhyolites and tuffs. And in this deep oceanic trench, you had the Tygerberg and the Swartland Formation being deposited. All right. So within this deep oceanic trench, which was formed by the collision of South America with Africa, you had the Tygerberg and Swartland Formation sediments being deposited. And they were pretty much, you would call, they were formed by undersea avalanches. All right. So they were formed by undersea avalanches. As South America started pressing into Africa, it started to cause localized earthquakes on the seabed, and it shook a lot of sediments. Many cubic kilometers of sediments got shaken loose, and they fell into the trench where they were deposited as turbidite deposits. All right, so turbidite deposits are undersea avalanche deposits. All right, and that's pretty much what the Tygerberg and Swartland Formation is. But with the Swartland Formation, there is one thing that is a little bit extra. The shallow limestones that you will find in the Swartland Formation is indicative that the trench within which these sediments were deposited started becoming shallower as it was squeezed out by the pressure between South America and Africa, and you had shallow water limestones being deposited toward the top. All right, so this is just a bit of a background. In a nutshell, basically, Cape Town 560 million years ago was essentially a series of island arcs, all right, almost like Japan, surrounded or bounded by a deep oceanic trench in which the Swartland and Tygerberg formations were being deposited. And this island arc was actually dotted with volcanoes. All right, so a pretty wild landscape and seascape. Okay, so now here we get to the nitty-gritty. So this is very important. So we are now going on to the structural setting of the SALDANIA belt and the faults that are located within the Cape Town area and environment. All right. So the Cape Town area, they are bounded by three major fault lines. All right. So the most important ones are the Piketberg Wellington fault, which runs, this is this guy over here. All right, so it runs from the paddle all the way through to just outside Veldrift. All right, and these faults are sideways moving faults. All right, so they're what you call strike slip faults. Okay, so you got the Piketberg Wellington fault, and then you've got the Colenso fault, which runs from just to the north of Stellenbosch all the way through towards Cape Columbine and Saldanha Bay. All right. So that is the Colenso fault, and that is a known active fault. All right, that fault is still active. It's also a fault in which you have sideways movement. So these faults are what you call sinistral strike slip faults. All right. When I talk about sinistral strike slip faults, it means that the one block moves towards the left while the other one relatively moves towards the right. All right. So the top block moves left and the bottom block relatively moves to the right relative to the top one. All right. So these are sinistral faults. Then you have a third fault, which is very active also and not shown on this map here. And it's called the MILNERTON fault. So the MILNERTON fault runs from Royals here at False Bay, on the eastern side of False Bay, if you go past Strand, all the way through to an area north of Bloberg Strand. All right. And it's also a possible sinistral strike slip fault. So it's left-hand movement. All right. Okay. So then also you have a major offshore structure which also controls seismic activity in the Cape region. All right. So there's the Cape region right over here. And you've got a major offshore structure over here. The structure is huge, all right? It's over 1,000 kilometers long in length. This structure over here runs between 100 to 500 kilometers offshore from South Africa. So it's sub-parallel to the south coast of South Africa. And it's called the Agulhas FALKLAND fracture zone, or also known as the DIAZ FALKLAND fracture zone, all right? And this fracture zone is basically the plane of weakness from which South America separated from Africa. All right. So basically, South America slid away this side out towards and opened up the Atlantic Ocean. All right. So this is literally the crack which was formed when South America broke away from Africa about 120 million years, 150 million years ago. All right, so this fracture zone over here is very important because it also, any seismic activity that happens along this fracture zone will affect the fault lines in the Cape region, as well as all the way through to Port Elizabeth. All right, so it's a very important offshore fault. Okay. So I've basically put in the location of the MILNERTON fault. So here's the Cape Town area, and there's Table Mountain, and we've got the MILNERTON fault system going through, cutting through just to the north of Bloberg, and then there's a secondary fault system which cuts through Melkbosstrand. And I had I basically had to use some imagination over here, but I had to basically have these faults join up. They could be entirely separate structures, or they could be the same type of structure, all right, where they were splaying off. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank goodness. All right. A very large fault at Melkbosstrand, at an area just underneath a restaurant called the Kliphuis or Castel Almar. And I basically just used some imagination just to see where this fault was going. And it pretty much follows the strike of the MILNERTON fault pretty closely, so they might be related. So this is more or less the going through the Cape Town area. Okay, right. Okay, so one of the faults here at Melkbosstrand, the one that I just showed you on the previous slide, I found it here at the Castel Almar restaurant, and it cuts through Melkbosstrand. I actually found it right there, very close to the NSRI fault zone, all right? It can be up to 1/2 meter thick, and it's filled with crushed rock. And it's also a sinistral or left-handed fault system. Okay, so it's a left lateral fault, and you can see that it's displaced these two faults over here. This was actually the same fault. It's displaced this fault by about 150 meters. All right, so it's displaced it by about 150 meters. All right. So this is the one that I found in Melkbos Strand, and then there's
Oh dear, I think he's just disappeared off our meeting. Let me quickly.
okay.
I'm gonna put it up for you, and then you tell me when I need to move on. Is that right?
Fantastic, fantastic. All right. Oh, yes. Okay. So we were right here. So you got a major fault running from the northwest to the southeast. All right. I've informally dubbed this fault the Coburg fault, and it's displaced an earlier east-west running fault by about 150 meters. All right. So you can see an earlier fault that's literally being cut in two by this major fault. All right. And you can see the one part moves to the left and the other one to the right. It is a sinistral strike slip fault, this main northwest southeast striking fault. All right. We can go to the next slide, Ineke. Okay, so you can see that the Coburg fault, this major northwest southeast striking fault, it's filled up with broken rock or brecciated rock. All right. So I've just highlighted it a bit. And you can see on the left-hand side, you got a lot of fractures also within the rock, as they were literally sheared and crushed by the movement along this fault plane. Okay, so this is just basically a closer look at the Coburg fault. Can you go to the next one, Ineke? Thank you. Here's one of the earlier east-west faults, which I just thought I might put in. It's one of the earlier faults. You can see there's a nice little scarp towards the right-hand side of the picture where the yellow line cuts through. So it's one of the earlier east-west faults that got literally displaced by this major Coburg fault. Okay. So this is also at Melkbos Strand. Can you go to the next slide for me, Ineke? Thanks. This is just an aerial shot of Derdesteen. It's not very clear because it's a small outcrop. All right. So Derdesteen is about 10 kilometers to the south of Melkbos Strand. And the position of Derdesteen and the faults that I've seen in there roughly corresponds with the expected position of the MILNERTON fault, even though I'm not 100% sure. All right. So I'm not 100% sure about that, and I'm going to be very honest, but it roughly corresponds to the expected position of the MILNERTON fault. Can we go through to the next slide, Ineke? Thanks. All right, so this is just a trace of a northwest striking fault, which I found here at Derdesteen, which I just highlighted in yellow, because this the fault plane is so thin that it really doesn't make for a good photograph. So this is just one of the traces which I pulled through. Can we go to the next slide, Ineke? All right. And this is on the northern side of the rock outcrop. You can see literally the rocks on the left almost being truncated by the fault. But there is a little bit of a continuation here at the bottom of the photograph. But that's also where I think the trace of the MILNERTON fault runs through. So it's at a place called Derdesteen, just to the south of Melkbos Strand. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so just basically to sum up, The geological development of the Cape Town area could be summed up roughly as follows. So by about 560 to 540 million years ago, you had the deposition of the Tygerberg and Swartland Formation sediments in a deepening ocean trench surrounded by volcanoes. As that trench started shallowing out, as South America was pushing against Africa, you had shallow water limestones being deposited, and eventually parts of the seafloor got caught up in the formation of the Saldania belt, and they formed these basaltic and gabbroic outcrops, which you see in the Bridgetown area, just near Worcester, near the area of Worcester. All right. So then also, after these sediments were deposited, you had initial east-west striking faults that were formed, but then they were truncated by northwest and southeast striking faults, as the Milnerton, Colenso, Piketberg, and Kuiberg faults. All right, so they are the late stage faults. And between 530 to 510 million years ago, you had the intrusion of the Cape granites into everything. All right, can we go through to the next slide, Ineke? Thanks. Okay, the DIAZ Falkland fracture zone was formed pretty much by the breakup of Gondwana. So essentially you had South America rifting away from Africa, and it created this major fault zone, which you find offshore of South Africa. All right, between 100 and 500 kilometers offshore. All right, so that's literally the suture along which South America and the Falkland Islands ruptured away from Africa to open up the Atlantic Ocean. And by 100 million years ago to 90 million years ago, these continents cleared Africa completely. All right, can we go on to the next slide, Ineke? Thanks. Okay, so the seismic history at the Milnerton Fault. This is just basically a slide showing you the active faults in South Africa. They're all highlighted in yellow, and in the red spot areas are where known seismic activity has occurred recently. All right, so you can see just offshore of South Africa, you see the Agulhas Falkland fracture zone and the faults literally turning into it. All right, almost like a horse tail. So in about 1620, there was a French Admiral General Augustin de Beaulieu, and his crew experienced an earthquake near Table Bay, which was very likely as a result of seismic activity along the Milnerton Fault. In 1695, a 4.5 earthquake occurred near the Cape of Good Hope. It could have been along the Milnerton Fault, or it could have been along the Colenso or Piketberg Wellington faults. All right, it could have been any one of those. In 1809, there was a major magnitude 6.5 earthquake in Cape Town, and its epicenter was just to the north of Robben Island near Dadesteen. That was a very significant earthquake, and it happened along the Milnerton Fault. It was one of the most powerful earthquakes that has ever hit Cape Town. That was followed by a magnitude 6.0 earthquake in 1811 along the same fault, the Milnerton Fault. And then in 1857, very similar thing happened. All right, so there's been quite a bit of seismic history along this Milnerton Fault over here at the bottom here in Cape Town. All right, in 2003, there was apparently some tremors that were felt in the Cape Town metropolitan area, which could have only come from either one of the three faults which are along the west coast north of Cape Town. In 2009, some minor tremors were felt again. And then in 2020, I was in Cape Town at the time when the magnitude 2.3 and magnitude 2.5 earthquakes struck at Malmesbury and Durbanville. All right. So that is very close to the line of where the Colenso fault is. So I actually felt that earthquake. My wife and I had quite a fright. And then I was in Cape Town again on the 16th of November when we had a magnitude 3.5 earthquake. But it wasn't felt so much. It was felt a little bit in Cape Town, but its epicenter was 76 kilometers to the north of Cape Town. So there's been some seismic history along in the Cape Town area, which has been the result of seismicity along the Milnerton fault and also the other two faults, the Colenso and the Piketberg Wellington. Can we go through to the next slide, Ineke? Thanks. So the causes of seismic activity near in Cape Town. There's a variety of causes for this, all right? So first of all, it's due to crustal tension because the crust is pulling apart along the East African Rift Valley, and it's causing tensional stresses across the Earth's crust in South Africa, and it's especially felt in weak areas where there are well-known fault zones occurring. Also, seismic activity along the DIAZ Falkland fracture zone. So if you've got a big bump in the DIAZ Falkland fracture zone, those PNS waves get relayed upwards. The forces of that earthquake will activate faults along the south coast of South Africa. All right. So that's also a causative factor. The erosion of the Table Mountain Group sediments. So you've got this huge pile of sediments in the Cape Mountains, and they're eroding away, and it's causing the loss of weight. So basically, all those sediments are eroding away in the Cape Mountains, and that releases a lot of stress along the fault lines in the Cape area. And that could also lead to some seismicity. And also in the far south, along the South Indian spreading ridge, where the Antarctic plate and the Indian plate comes together, some seismicity in that area can also be felt and relayed up the faults in the Cape area, as was the case in September last year. All right. Okay, so the hazards of the Milnerton fault, if we can go through to the next slide. Thanks, Ineke. The hazards of the Milnerton fault, if we have a 6.0 or 6.5 or even a 7, heaven forbid, a 7 magnitude earthquake along the Milnerton fault, there will be massive structural damage in the area because it runs through a very well-developed area, urbanized area. It's not like it was back in 1809. There will be a high number of casualties, all right, perhaps in the thousands. The emergency services or facilities might not be adequate enough to deal with the casualties and injuries of people, all right? And our rescue services might not be able to get everybody out. And one specific thing that also is of a concern is most of Cape Town, most of the SALDANIA belt sediment rocks are covered with younger wind-blown sediments, all right? And the water table is quite shallow in some areas in Cape Town. Okay, we need to look no further than an area called Rietvlei, all right? So when you get a big shake along the Milnerton fault, you can have an effect, what's called liquefaction, all right? So the sediments can, the groundwater table can be disturbed. The sediments can literally liquefact, all right? So they turn into a slurry, all right? And what then happens is that houses and buildings can be swallowed up or severely damaged. All right. So that is the big danger of an earthquake along the Milnerton fault. Unlikely hazards, we can go through to the next slide. So hazards that are unlikely to happen, it's not very likely that there would be major catastrophic damage to the nuclear power station because they've already understood, the people that built the power station already understood and knew about the presence of faults in the area. And they built Koeberg on a seismic raft capable of withstanding earthquakes up to and over 7 magnitude. All right. Tsunamis unlikely to form as a result of any shakes along the MILNERTON fault, because the MILNERTON fault doesn't have much vertical displacement. All right. When you have vertical displacement, these are faults that move where one block moves up and the other block moves down, or faults that would, or pieces of rock that would literally dive into the mantle of the earth along a thrust. Wherever there's vertical movement on a fault line, there is where you will have risks of a tsunami. But because the fault lines in the Cape area are sideways strike slip faults, the hazards are not as great. I'm not ruling it out, but it's not as great as it would be with if the fault had a major vertical displacement. All right, because when one of the fault blocks moves up and down relative to the other one, the water column above it will also follow suit, and you will have a major tsunami that could follow. All right, but because the faults around the Cape area, in the Cape Town area itself, are pretty much horizontal, and the movement is horizontal, a tsunami is unlikely, but not impossible. All right. And that is pretty much my story about the earthquake hazards in Cape Town. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm open for any questions. Sorry about the poor connection that we had.
No, we thought maybe it's your weather. Thank you, Werner. Does anyone have any questions? Is there anyone? I was quite fascinated with the whole Koeberg situation, because it's always been something that I was wondering about.
Yes. Fortunately, the people that built the Koeberg power station was, they were really keenly aware of major faults in the area. So they built it on some sort of a seismic raft. They really went all out on planning the foundations with military precision. Unfortunately, that's not the case with major buildings and houses in the MILNERTON area. That is where the problem comes in.
Okay, Pam has a question for you. Pam?
Yes.
I do. You were talking about that, where's it? Just get it, Dadistian. You were showing the possible fault lines there. What rock type were we looking at? I know it had, the water made it look very black, but what rock type were we looking at there?
The rock type that you were looking at there were some quartzites and intermixed with shale and siltstone. So it's essentially a very dirty quartzite intermixed with shale and siltstone, and the bedding planes are actually quite steep. Even though you can't really see it clearly on the photograph, they dipped about 80 degrees towards the east. So it's mainly quartzite and shale with some siltstone in it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, on the chat, Angus has said, looking at Google Earth, you can see the influence of the deep faults. There is an intersection of at least 3 fault suits.
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate a bit, Angus?
Yeah, thanks. Can I share a screen by any chance?
Yes.
No, I just need to change the settings quickly. Yes, you should be able to now.
Okay, can we all see that?
Yes, thanks.
Yes, I can see.
There's the one I think, Werner, you were talking about.
Yes.
The DIAZ coming all the way down. This is another
Yes.
one coming down from sort of the Gulf area.
Yes.
But if you look, there's a very faint trace of these ones coming through here. This one, I think, is possibly the MILNERTON, or part of the MILNERTON forms part of. But you can see that there's that trace, and that trace all meeting
Yes,
in that
yes,
particular area. So, you know,
absolutely.
I've really enjoyed your presentation. It just says, you see, you can see that one there, that one there, that one there, that one there,
Yes.
and this one coming across. So that connecting it to the DIAZ fault, obviously there's a lot of, as you said, rocking and rolling. But thanks very much for
Yes.
your presentation. It was great.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I wish I could have mapped the entire Cape Town area, but yes, there's a lot of confluence of faults in that area, and also further out into the mountains itself towards Worcester, the Toitskloof, you've got major vertical normal faults in that area. So yes, this place is, you know, it used to be very seismically active in its day, and it still is to a lesser extent. Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess it must be kind of difficult to map when you've got houses and all the rest of it on top of everything.
Very hard, especially the vegetation makes it tricky. The vegetation and all this windblown sands really makes it difficult, and that's where you need some heavy artillery, like the guys and girls from the Council for Geoscience, that can actually do some seismic surveys in the area, and I'm sure that they have. So yeah.
Great, thank
so
you.
yeah.
Anyone else with a question? Pam says we could use this for grade 10 gemology, making it so
You're
real.
more than welcome to do that.
Are you willing
More
to
than
share
welcome.
your presentation, Werner?
Absolutely, by all means.
That's awesome. Thank you
Just
so
add
much.
to that,
By all means.
there was so much terminology in that, and I know we use it, but once you've done some basics and you got them working on a case study, it would make it just so real. So it's not just geology in the classroom, it's now real-time stuff. And
Yes.
the future is Cape Town not going to shake, rattle, and roll? Should we be worried?
Yes, something like that. I think we should just be aware. We should be aware that yes, there is always a risk. And I think that the Cape Town City Council should really start slowly but surely implement a disaster management program in order to mitigate. We cannot stop. If the MILNERTON fault's going to go, it's going to go. But we can at least try and make the consequences of a catastrophic quake in that area not as bad. All right. So that is a very big thing. We need to start focusing our emergency services and also our civil services in gearing up for the possibility that there could be, it's not if, it's when, that there could be major quakes along the MILNERTON fault, and we need to absolutely sort of be as best prepared as we can, but we don't need to panic, but it is a threat. It is, we need to park it in the back of our minds. It is there. There is a present danger for it. Thanks, Angus.
Yeah, he's just given us the recent volcano activity page, which I think would show that as well. So you don't think we need to go to Cape Town with hard hats quite yet? Do you think those?
No, not quite yet.
Do you think those earthquakes last year were precursors to more, or will it be quiet again for a while?
That I need to go through this. I need to go through the seismic history a little bit more in detail. But a lot of the earthquakes that happened in the Cape Town area last year had their origins in different places. So I don't really think that they're precursors to something big. Because one of the September earthquakes actually was as a result of a major seismic event that happened along the South Indian Spreading Ridge, about 2,000 kilometers to the south of Cape Town. And the other one was just basically due to a small seismic event along the Colenso fault. So it's two totally different areas. And the other quake that we had in November was 76 kilometers to the northwest of Saldanha Bay. So the foci of those earthquakes are in different areas. I don't think we should panic. I don't think it's the precursor to anything big, but we need to be aware that there is, there is a danger in the Cape area, and there's definitely a wolf in the woods that we do need to be aware of, and we need to start educating people on it.
Okay, thank you. Are there no other questions from anyone? Then I need to say thank you so much, Werner. That was absolutely enlightening, fascinating, so interesting to see your own photographs, that you've actually gone and done the research there and looked for it. Yeah, we really appreciate that, and that we will be on the lookout now if we go down to Cape Town as well. So thank you very, very much. And yeah, the comments, geographers are just awesome. So yeah, thanks for being a geographer with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Right, and then we'll see everyone else at our next webinar, and have a lovely holiday if you're on holiday. Otherwise, good luck for the rest of this week. Right, goodbye everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Werner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, Werner. Thanks, everyone. Nice to chat.
That's a
See you
pleasure.
soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.